Hello and thank you for choosing Once a Warrior. My name is Monty Betham and I'm joined in studio by a legend of the club, 159 games over, I think it's a decade. Wairangi Koopu, thanks for joining me, man.
Tēnā koe Monty, yeah, my loss was full.
Brother, Sir Peter texted me last night and he's happy about the show he's come on, so no pressure because you've got to be as good as he is. But he's like, good, I get to find out what Koopu was up to because he doesn't know. You know, you could try call him every now and again.
Yeah, that would be a hand. He's always messaged me every now and again to see sort of how I am, and I always forget to try and catch up with him. But yeah, it's an honour to be on here once and have a little cordial with you.
So what are you up to these days, man?
Still working in television. As you know, we pass each other in the hallways of Sky every now and again. I also work for another production company, a little bit more of production in terms of creative producing and reporting in current affairs, and still have my hand in quite a few things. Still trying to pick up the boots of touch and tag and a little bit of rugby league social here and there, but other than that, my friend, just enjoying life in Tamaki Makaurau with my kids who are getting big now, and get the opportunity to catch up with good people like you, my friend.
You talk about getting the boots on, everything else, but next week you put the gloves on. One half of the main event for Fight for Life, the other half is Kevin Mialamu, and to make it worse, I'm in his corner. It is the Bigger King Fight for Life in association with We Build and I Am Hope as a charity. How's the prep been, man?
It's been okay. Like, as you remember, I did this maybe 11 years ago, the Fight for Life, when it was sort of in its heyday, and I would think it was 31 back then, sort of recently retired. It's a little bit different nowadays, having to, juggle an extra 10 or 11 years, plus work, plus whānau. I'm very thankful for the sponsors in particular who have come on board to support the I Am Hope Foundation, because it is something that's very close to my heart, and I'm going to try and do my best. It's funny because people keep asking me about this main event, and I said, well, it's two things. It's a lose-lose, because either I lose to Kev and yourself in the Fight for Life, or I win, and I lose because I've obviously had to beat up Kevin Mialamu, who's one of the nicest guys in the world. But then it's also a win-win, because if I win, Rugby League wins. If Kev wins, Rugby League wins.
I see where you're going with this mind trick thing.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't work. It's a lose-lose for me, but it is what it is, and it's for a great cause, mate. All right, let's talk the great game of Rugby League and remind everyone why you are a legend of that jumper.
Koopu's away, but he's still going, Koopu. He's a big, strong fellow, Wairangi Koopu. Koopu, tremendous athleticism. Koopu with the spin, beats one, will get there. Koopu's into some open space, to the line, they love it. Oh, big, don't argue. Put on his backside. Cop that, says Koopu. Koopu will get a double, and that is the icing on the cake. As Koopu goes all the way. Koopu in game number 150.
All right, Corps, you see that footage, man? Talk to me.
Yeah, it brings back some really good memories. I didn't think I was that good, but the highlights definitely make me proud that I was sort of achieved what I achieved. They were good times, and I reflect on really good memories, and I suppose good friendships that I made over that time. But it was cool to watch that footage and bring back some of those memories of playing in those games.
Do the kids know how good Dad was?
Nah. It's funny, even my son, when I put it on our social media yesterday, my son watched and he was like, whoa, I didn't even know that you were that good. So my daughter wasn't born back then. My son was very, very young. So it was good to have that little highlight reel.
Talking about young, I remember you coming to the Warriors at 17 years of age from Tane Wharau with this big mullet and some chubby cheeks, bro. Yeah. How did that come about?
My parents were teachers in Huntly, so I grew up in Huntly in a very rugby league stronghold, very proud rugby league community. Tane Wharau in particular, there were some good players that came out of Tane Wharau, Lance Ohaya. Ricky Muru was one of our ex-Kiwis from there. I think even the Rapida boys, Sammy and Steve were there for a little while. Yeah, so I was signed on as a junior with the Warriors around the Super League days. Ackers signed me on to a junior contract, and I was coming up and training in the development squads, and fast forward a couple of years when I finished school, and we sort of had the 19s comp running with the Warriors. I ended up moving up and playing for Glenora. Just so happened that some suspensions at the club, some injuries, and Mark Graham, who was the coach at the time, sort of asked me to come in and fill in a spot, and within a week he had me in the team. So I was very fortunate, that to be in the right place at the right time. But I think I was about 106 kgs.
I told you, mate.
I was. I remember. I didn't realise I was that chubby until one time we went away on a trip down to Queenstown, and one of our trainers at the time told me to ease up on the curly fries, and I realised I was a bit bigger than I should have been. So
who's that trainer? Because you can thank him for that 12-pack or 16-pack of abs that you've had.
It was Sammy Parnapa. Yeah, Sammy Parnapa.
Okay, brother. So you got called in, but like you said, it was like a week later you were debuting against Melbourne Storm. How did you get the boarding pass to debut, which would have been a bit of a shock, and then your memories of that game against the Melbourne Storm?
Yeah, it just so happened that Ridgie and I think Nigel Vangana, they got suspended for touching the referee in the game, and there was sort of a bit of drama. They also had a couple of injuries on board, and then so I've ended up signing on for a temporary contract with the club, and Mark Graham pulled me into the bench straight away. And it just so happened to be against who would go on to win the premiership, the Melbourne Storm. I came off the bench very early on. Just so happened, I think at the time, Melbourne Storm scored 2 very early tries, and Matty Spence, who was the starting back rower, had let both of them in. And so Mark Graham ended up just coat hanging him off the field within about 10 or 12 minutes and stuck me straight on there. And it went by in a blur. I enjoyed the opportunity. I don't remember much of it. I was pretty fresh back then. I remember, putting a good shot on Marcus Bai, which was probably the proudest moment I'd ever had up until that moment. Tanni Flow Club and the Huntly community sent a bus up to watch me play, and I still remember them down in the section. They had some signs up and everything, and it was very important to me to have them there. I only played 6 games that year. I don't think I hadn't been in a professional environment enough to really understand what Mark Graham needed out of me. Because at the time, he was one of my heroes growing up, Mark Graham. And I relate it to like a young kid going to war who would do anything for his general, who like that told him to. Because I remember, some of his theories, when I think back of it now, I was like, holy crap. I don't know if you remember, but he used to say to us, I don't want you coming off the field for anything less than a broken leg. And even then, he would say, if you've got a broken leg. And I remember he used to say to us, there is no better place to die than on the field in front of all these
I was just going to bring that up, because that's what it's like, eh?
Yeah.
I mean, if you died on the field, you'd
and I was there,
be a hero.
Yeah, I was there as a 19-year-old going, 100%. And all the time thinking, wait, 19? I don't want to die in front of all these people playing rugby league.
Like you mentioned, Mark Graham, there would have been a lot of mentors out there that helped you early on. And how did they help you?
Yeah, Big Joe, and back then it was, he was still sort of that rookie, senior player type of mentality a little bit. So, if we went away on team trips, I was sort of carrying people's bags or making cup of teas for Big Joe. But yeah, Big Joe, he took me under his wing quite a bit and sort of, introduced me to sort of the training lifestyle of things, even though he wasn't a great trainer, Big Joe. But then Ridgie in particular as well. In terms of mindset, Ridgie was next level. I learned a hell of a lot of off Ridgie. Both me and Clinton Torpey at the time, who came on at very similar times, learned a lot from Ridgie and the professional rugby league player mentality. But yeah, early on, those two definitely.
Daniel Anderson and the type of bloke he is. Your memories of Daniel?
It was Daniel Anderson who actually told me I wasn't necessarily a natural rugby league player, but I was a natural athlete. Yes. And so Daniel Anderson did his best to coach me in rugby league as much as possible. I had a lot of respect for Ando. I still consider him probably the best coach I had in terms of actually coaching our team. There
was a halftime talk in particular. You know where I'm going here, eh? Yeah. It's the Penrith game, 2001. I think we were losing 16-12 at half time. and then he comes in.
Was it only by 6? Was it only 16-12?
It was only by 4
wow.
points, but you would have thought that someone was dying because you weren't actually on the field, right? So you were coming down, you were in the change. Could you see it unfolding and erupting?
Well, I was in the changing rooms early, so because I hadn't been on the field yet, I sort of went straight back, a beeline straight back to the change rooms. I think I was there alongside maybe Tukes and Richard Villasanti at the time, but he came barreling in. He did like a Desi Haslam, kicked the door and it flung open. He walked straight up to Mark Tukey and went, F you. And then he went to Villa and he went, F you. And as the players started coming in, he went along the line and was like, F you and F you too.
We're all sitting down, and as Ando does, and he gets in your face, and it was like, F you. F you, and there was Stacey there, and there was Campo, and some other guys, and it was F you, and he went pretty much one by one through everyone, the whole lot of us, until he said on the way out, F the whole lot of you, before we walked out. But it ended up working, because we scored 36 points in the second half, and we come back and won that game as Stacey started. I mean, we depended on him so many times when we were playing, and not just our era, the era before us, the era after us, and you were still part of the era after us, and then he came back. What makes him so great? Is he the greatest warrior?
I think so. I think he's the greatest warrior. I mean, I put Simon up there as well, very close behind Michael Luck as well, and even Manu. I think those probably are some of my greatest warriors who have sort of appeared for the clubs in a lot of games. But yeah, I'd rank Stacey as my number one warrior. Just what he could do on the field, how he led by actions, Yeah, he was phenomenal to play alongside, and I remember thinking to myself, even at the time of sort of playing inside of him as the back row on his side, how privileged I was to play inside of him. I think one of the biggest compliments I ever had playing at the Warriors was one time Danny Ransom came to me and he said, the first person on the list that he would pick was Stacey Jones. Oh. He said it got to a stage where the second person he would pick would be me, because Stace got a lot of confidence out of my defensive skills on the inside of him. I could talk and I could sort of look after him a lot while he was out there, and I found, I still remember that it was entrenched in my memory, knowing that was probably one of the biggest compliments I could get, that Stacey Jones actually appreciated me being inside him.
Some other funny things about you, and it comes with Ando too. Was it against the Tigers when you were jumping it? There was post-try celebrations where everyone gets in the photo to throw the ball, but you joined their photo, bro. Was that the Tigers?
Yeah, it was the Tigers, and I think it might have been the last game of the 2002 season. There was a whole lot of young bucks that were sort of thrown into that game, because Ando didn't think we could win the minor premiership. I think we might have lost the week before, and he thought it was too far for us, and we just were going to try and rest some of the senior players. But yeah, it was the last game. I think last game at home against the Tigers, and they scored a try. It was in the first half, and they gathered together to take a group photo, and I knew it wasn't a real camera.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
I did. People thought, I was like, did you think it was a real camera? I was like, no, I just thought it was going to be on TV. I'd jump in the background. But as soon as I sort of walked in the background and sort of pulled a peace sign to sort of photobomb their try celebration, I realised we were losing, and that Daniel Anderson was probably going to be pissed that I was sort of flaring up a little bit, because he didn't really like the flare.
It was funny because you thought he was going to be pissed then. He wasn't that pissed then, or maybe he was a little bit pissed. One moment where I thought he was going to be a little bit annoyed with you, he wasn't. You know the one I'm talking about?
He was annoyed.
When you dropped, I'd say, seriously, probably 5 to 6 balls.
I think it was 6. I think I made 6 clean errors.
And we mean after each other.
Yeah, it was a lot. Look, I blame it on the flu. I was a little bit sick, and at the time we could take Sudafeds. Yep. You could buy Sudafeds in the pharmacy, and so my doctor, I said I was a bit sick, so my doctor gave me some Sudafeds. I probably took about 5 or 6,
many?
Way too many. And I sort of got a little bit of tunnel vision during the game, and things sort of got a little bit. This is what I blame it on. Anyway.
Yes, carry on.
And also it was very slippery that night. But yeah, I dropped 1 or 2 balls. My confidence dropped very early, and then I just kept dropping balls. And then it just so happened that Ando was furious around about third or fourth error I made, and it was absolutely furious. The trainer came out and he was like,
before you start. So it was 3 or 4. I think I was in the box with him because I was injured, and he goes, "Tell Wairangi Koopu to get in dummy half and run it from dummy half because you had feet for hands. You couldn't catch the ball. Yeah. You go into dummy half and you drop the ball. Yeah. And then what was the message that got sent out to you after that?"
The trainer ran out and he was confused, and when he delivered the message, I was confused as well. But he said to me, "Look, Ando's message is, when we've got the ball, go onto the sideline and sign some autographs, and when we're on defence, come back on the field." But yeah, he came to me after the game and he saw the funny side in it, and he was like, "Well, that was pretty much just a comedy act." But you know, I appreciated that sort of it got beyond a joke. Yeah, and it was fine.
With all those Sudafeds, because I know your pre-game ritual, which is sleeping. And I don't know why, like you'd sleep a minute before you go and take the field or before we warm up. You probably weren't sleeping much that day. Talk to me about your ritual and how that came about, because you're pretty hell-bent on it.
Yeah. I mean, before I really knew about, I suppose, muscle memory stuff and getting into routines of doing the same things so that you can sort of reach the same pinnacle every game. I mean, I had a weird routine. At home, I used to sort of wake up a little bit late, and then I used to watch Braveheart pretty much every home game. I watched Braveheart like 50 or 60 times. I don't know why. But then, I would make my way to the game with the rest of the boys. Sometimes we'd meet at hotels and have a kai or not, but usually we'd go to the field. And we'd go to the field 3 hours before, and my nerves were always a little bit shot, and I'd get a little bit of anxiety before we game. So I thought the best way to counter that was to strap myself up, get myself ready, find myself a nice little quiet spot, and probably before I, as an older man now, I sort of do a bit of meditation. It was probably more meditation. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep.
I think it was more snoring than anything. I could hear you snoring under the bench, and I could hear Stacey having a yak, because he'd always have a yak.
Yeah. He would throw up as well.
He'd be throwing up. So that's crazy. Okay, Corps, let's talk Unsung Heroes, because I mean, you were one. Who were some of the unsung heroes that we haven't heard of that were huge, and why for you?
That's a good question. I mean, in those early days, I think, Johnny Carlo was like a real unsung hero to me. I don't know why. He seemed like that every time he took the field in his position, he just did a really good job. Even though he didn't really do anything flashy, he was probably a little bit like Ivan in that he just did his job well. He was sort of stable for the team. And I always have this memory of him in 2002 when we made that grand final against the Sharks. And I always remember the dummy half pass getting thrown to Stace. I was on the inside of Stace, just on his inside shoulder. He's put that little grubber kick, and I watched it all the way. And there, at the side of my eye, Johnny Carlo's just gone boom and swept on it and scored under the post, and knew that we were going to make the grand final after that game. And the closest person next to me, who was probably my best mate in the squad at that time, was Clinton Torpy, and we sort of turned to each other and had this massive hug, and it was all emotional. And it's a cool little memory that I have of JC.
Yeah. Let's touch on the 2002 grand final, and it's always about moments. Do you think there's a moment in particular that changed that game and gave them the momentum?
There was a couple. I know a lot of people talk about the Villa head button.
Let's talk about that. What do you think that was? Do you think that was a big part of that game?
A little bit, in that it fired Freddie up. It's sort
because I'm never going to call you a legend again. You know why?
Because I elbowed him in the head.
You're hiding that, hey? You were the one that came through with an aerial shoulder barge, elbow in the head, which dropped Freddie Fittler to the ground, and then Villa the gorilla decided to put his head there. So, Wairangi Koopu, I blame you.
Well, you can then also blame Daniel Anderson, because Daniel Anderson came to me before the game. He said, "You've got one job: put as much pressure on Freddie at the kick as possible." And so, I was just flying at him as much as I could to try and put some pressure on him. But there was sort of other things that may have been mentioned that or may not have been mentioned that sort of changed during that game. One in particular, say for instance, our bench rotation just changed up a little bit.
I don't really care about that. I was just setting you up. Okay. I was setting you up for the Villa moment.
Blame it on me.
When we think about some of our past teammates, Ivan Cleary was one, and he was a great one in 2003 especially. And then the dynamics having changed from a player that you're playing alongside to a coach. What was that like? And did you think he was going to be as good as he is now?
I did, because he always had a very good rugby league brain. But it was weird. It was a little bit weird going from him being, like you say, going from him being a player that we took the field alongside to him actually being the head coach and having to make decisions. And the thing about it was, by that stage, I was a little bit of a senior within the squad. I think I'd been there for maybe 8 or 9 years. Ivan, being that I'd been there so long, sort of left me to my own devices. And so I was probably still at that age, at 27, 28, where I still needed coaching as much as possible within a rugby league frame of playing the game. And so my actual game, alongside with having a few injuries, struggled in my last year of playing at the Warriors underneath Ive, because I couldn't really find my groove. I couldn't really get that. What I was good at, I couldn't really find it again.
There was a little bit of a changing of the guard, and probably at the expense of yourself. It's a little bit of a tough one, eh?
It was. And to be fair, I didn't expect at the beginning of the season. I actually thought I would sign on again and play maybe another 2 or 3 years with the club and finish my career there. I had the sort of opportunity towards the front end of that year to go to the UK and make sort of equally the same amount of money and maybe extend my career for a little bit longer. But I really wanted to stay at the club. But it just sort of so happened that, the club was going in a different direction. I wasn't performing as best as I could. Ivan came to me, I think, on the Tuesday and said, look, I'm not going to pick you for this last game. I know it's disappointing. He wanted to put Benny Mazzolino in there, who's coming through the ranks. He was a promising young prop and back row. And he said to me, look, I still want you to be involved in the day, because it was going to be a big day. It was going to be Ruben's last game as well. It might even be Logues'. I think it might have been Logues' last appearance for the club. And so he wanted me to be a part of the day with the boys, warm up with everybody, and then sort of run out and be acknowledged as one of the players playing their last game at the club. But I wasn't really keen. I felt like it was a little bit insulting to have to run out with the boys and then
have a shower.
And then have a shower and sit on the bench alongside them while they played their last game. But I warmed up with the boys, and it just so happened that Simon came to me sort of mid warm up and said to me, look, just quietly, he said, "Do you want me to pull an injury here so that you can take the field?" And I was very, very humbled by that gesture, but I just couldn't do it to him. I don't know why. I mean, when I think about it, it's like, probably he went on to play years and years and a lot of games for the club. But I was humbled by that gesture, and while it was disappointing not to take the field with the brothers for my last game at Mount Smart Stadium, that was a good memory that I took away from it.
Stellar career, 159 games. When you first came to the club, any other moments or games, or for whatever reason, that stick in the mind of Wairangi Koopu?
I really enjoyed my 150th. I wasn't actually supposed to start in that game. I was going to be coming off the bench, but somebody got hurt, and I ended up playing in the centres. So I really enjoyed that game. I think I scored 2 tries, and it was one that I really remember. But other than that, there's games that now are still just sort of highlights on YouTube, where sort of Broncos games and scraps like the one you got me sin-binned for when I was trying to stick up for you and you were trying to beat everybody up on the Broncos side. And, those are real good memories I have.
Well, Koopu, once a warrior, always a warrior. You were one of the absolute best brothers. So thank you so much for your service to the club.
Thank you very much, my friend.
And thank you for tuning in, and no doubt you enjoyed that. You can enjoy next week as well, as we have another guest right here on Once a Warrior.
Koopu's away, but he's still going, Koopu. He's a big, strong fellow, Wairangi Koopu. Koopu, tremendous athleticism. Koopu with the spin, beats one, will get there.